Hey guys, it's Darwin here with my weekly Q&A to answer more of your questions. If you want to ask a question for next week's Q&A, you can either leave it in the comment box below or send me a video question over to darwinonthetrail@yahoo.com, and then next week I'll answer as many as I possibly can. All right, let's go ahead and get into this week's first question. What's your favorite snack or treat that doesn't usually make it into your bag? Something that isn't too easy to find, worth it to carry, or doesn't keep too long? What is your go-to that doesn't disappoint? So lately I have been really into avocados. For some reason, whenever I started the Pinhoti Trail last month, I was just hardcore wanting guacamole all the time for some reason. So I decided to start carrying an avocado with me in my pack, and then Fritos. Now I can't always find them when I'm resupplying, because a lot of times I'll just resupply at like a convenience store or a Dollar General, but anytime that I find some sort of a grocery store on the trail, I always make sure I carry avocados. They are a bit heavier, definitely 100%, but I think that it's totally worth it because they taste awesome. Having fresh guacamole out on the trail, nothing really beats that. It's good fat, it's good protein, so avocados have definitely become my favorite go-to snack on the trail.
I'm Sean, and I'm out here at Sky Meadows State Park in Virginia, and it's about 34 degrees and pretty windy today, but not as windy as it was on Friday when we were seeing winds of 50 to 60 and more miles per hour. And I'm wondering, what's the worst conditions that you've had to hike in? And have there been any conditions that made you say, yeah, not today?
So I've definitely hiked in some rough conditions. It's actually kind of windy out here today. I don't know if you guys can hear that wind noise. Not as windy as there, but there's not really ever been a time where I was just like, I'm not hiking in it. Typically, as I always say, and as cliche as it's starting to become, I always embrace the suck, and I always just hike. If it's thunderstorming, if it's snowing, if it's hardcore raining, if it's windy, I get out on the trail and I hike, especially if I'm out there and I'm doing something like a long distance hike. I really don't want to be held up in a shelter or a tent all day long waiting out the weather, so I usually just go for it. Now obviously that's not always the best advice if there's like hardcore lightning storms or something that can get you into a dangerous situation, but I typically just go for it. I always just get out there and I hike as much as I possibly can and just deal with it. As far as the worst weather that I think that I've hiked in, I don't really know. There was a handful of times out on the Appalachian Trail in 2015 where we experienced some hardcore temperature drops and pouring rain and hardcore winds, but nothing too crazy, nothing that I can really recall being a really big deal. I can tell you that in December, when Nemo and I did our rim to rim to rim of the Grand Canyon, over on the north rim of the canyon, that night it got down to about 12 degrees, and the wind was like up to 60 miles an hour. So that was pretty hardcore. I didn't really have to hike in it, but we did camp in it that night, and it was pretty gnarly weather over on the north rim of the canyon. Aside from that, I can't really think of any time in particular, but I always just get out on the trail, I embrace the suck, and I keep hiking. What advice would you give for dealing with family/friends who don't want you to leave for 4 to 6 months? I went to hike the PCT in 2019, and that's one of the main hurdles I'm experiencing. That's a great question. I know a lot of people that have dealt with the same thing, and Snuggles and I kind of dealt with a similar situation whenever we were going out to hike the AT in 2015. Now, my family didn't really care. They probably didn't even really think that we were going to do it, but her family was insanely concerned about her going out on a trail into the middle of nowhere for 4 to 6 months. So the best way that we figured out how to get them to cope with it is we invited her family over for a night. We ordered some pizza and we watched some Appalachian Trail documentaries. So we kind of introduced it to them that way so they could see firsthand exactly what we were doing. After that, they got more involved and they were actually kind of excited that we were going out and doing this thing because we showed them, what other people had done, and it kind of reassured them of what we were doing and that we weren't getting ourselves into a terrible, crazy situation. And they got more invested. And then they were kind of interested in what we were doing. They were asking more questions. They wanted to see our gear. We even had some people that wanted to come out and hike with us. So I would suggest kind of introducing it to your friends and your family that way, maybe inviting them over, showing them a documentary, maybe suggesting for them to read a certain book on someone else's hike. That would be the best way to transition them into that, and then just connect it. And I think that you'll probably be pretty surprised, and they'll be really interested in the thing that you're about to do. Good luck in planning for the PCT in 2019. I'm about to head out there myself. Hopefully it'll be a great hike for me and for you. I saw your new van, the Clydesdale, here and on Instagram. Can you tell us more about that? Are you still towing the little camper? So yeah, as some of you might have noticed, right at the beginning of the year, Snuggles and I bought a new van. The reason was our old van, the Black Stallion, was really starting to give us problems. It had over 200,000 miles on it, and all the seals were kind of stripped out in the engine, and it just wasn't as dependable as it used to be. So we ended up deciding to get another van, and instead of buying a minivan this time, we decided to buy a full-size van for a couple of different reasons. We've really wanted to build out the inside of a cargo van and eventually sell our camper that we've been living out of for 5-6 months. So to just kind of make things more simple so we don't have to tow the trailer anymore. Currently, we are here in Joshua Tree, California. We are staying at a friend's house, and I am currently building out the Clydesdale. Once we get done building it out, building a bed and a kitchenette and everything in it, the Clydesdale will be our new adventure mobile. Is it possible to hike if you haven't got a big, fluffy beard? It's probably possible, but why would you bother? I watched an older video and saw that you used up to 7 Ziploc bags, one for each day. Do you still use that system? I was really thinking about doing this for the PCT. Do you recommend this? I love the idea of being organized with my food. Yeah, so I absolutely still separate my food into days in gallon Ziploc bags. And the reason I had to start doing that is because I have a really high metabolism. And if I just put a bunch of food in my food bag, when I get out on the trail, I'll just keep eating it. So the reason I had to start separating things into gallon Ziploc bags is to make sure at the beginning of that day I can pull out day one and I know that that's all the food that I have to ration for that day and that I don't dig into day 2 or day 3. So it really helped me not only stay organized, but also limit me from eating all of my food on like the first day. Because some days out on the trail, you're not really as hungry. Other days, hiker hunger hardcore sets in, and it's really hard not to just want to eat everything in your food bag. So I did it on the Appalachian Trail, I did it on the Pinhoti Trail, and yes, I will be doing it on the PCT. I highly recommend it. Ziploc bags don't weigh much. Label each one of them for every day that you think you're going to be resupplying on. Put all your food in there. That way you stay organized and you don't eat all of your food in one go.
I've been doing training hikes now for about the last 5 or 6 weeks, and I'm up to doing about 15-mile hikes a day, and I can do them back to back over the weekend for 3 days. And my question for you is, how do you toughen up your feet? Because my legs are working fine, but my dogs are hurting every day. So how do you fix it so that your feet somehow catch up with the rest of your body?
So it's probably not the greatest advice, but really how I toughen up my feet is I just go out and hike. So you're already working on that. I would just suggest keep hiking. Eventually your feet are gonna harden up, toughen up, you're gonna get calluses, and yeah, that's really the only way I know how to do it. I guess if you wanted to, you could go out and hike barefoot. I probably wouldn't, but just keep hiking. Eventually your feet are gonna build up good calluses, turn into big, gnarly hiker feet, and then you should be good. Would you rather stay in a shelter on the AT or set up camp in a tent or hammock? It seems everyone tries to get in a shelter, but you may have to be around others you would rather not be around. Is the company and ease of a shelter worth not setting up camp? So Chris, the only time that I ever stay in a shelter is if there's some really hardcore weather and there's not a lot of people staying in the shelter. I personally don't like staying in shelters like on the Appalachian Trail just because they're usually totally overcrowded. People are noisy at night. You have some people that snore all night long, so you don't typically get the best sleep in a shelter. I always rather be in my tent. However, if there is some really hardcore weather, I know it's pouring rain and it's still pouring rain before I get to camp. If the shelter doesn't look too packed, I'll usually slide in there just so I don't have to set up a tent in the rain and don't have to break a wet tent down in the morning. Now, the great thing about the Pinhoti Trail, where there were a handful of shelters and there was nobody out there. So every night that I stayed in a shelter on the Pinhoti, there was no one else there except for the guy that I was hiking with. So it was like totally luxury, and I definitely took advantage of every shelter just so I didn't have to set my tent up. I definitely took advantage of them, but typically I try to stay out of shelters. I really don't usually ever camp near shelters. I try to find somewhat of a small stealth spot and set my camp up just so I can get better sleep and I'm not disturbing other people and other people aren't disturbing me. All right, guys, last question of the week. So this question may sound silly to some, but my wife got me into backpacking. I absolutely love it until it comes to the sleeping part. For whatever reason, I spook myself out every time. I've been infantry in the Army for 7 years. I sleep out in the field constantly, but when it comes to the tent, I freak myself out. Have you ever encountered this or met people that have been able to overcome this? Does it just get better the more you do it? I have never really had that problem. Actually, I am more comfortable and less spooked out when I'm in a tent in the middle of the woods. I would think that over time, you're probably just going to get used to it. I would assume that you're probably freaked out because you're in a shelter versus just laying out kind of in the middle of nowhere and being able to see everything around you like cowboy camping. Maybe whenever you're sleeping in your tent, you should start keeping both vestibules open so your sides are still open and you can still see around you, and that might help you better adjust into sleeping in a tent. And then over time, maybe just close one vestibule and have one open, and then eventually maybe you can close both and you'll feel comfortable. Like I said, I have always been more comfortable in my tent in the middle of nowhere than I am like sleeping in the van or sleeping in a hotel room. It's just kind of my comfort spot, so I've personally never experienced it, but I would assume that you will eventually overcome it. All right, guys, so if you want to leave a question for next week's Q&A, you can either leave it in the comment box below or send me a video question over to darwinonthetrail@yahoo.com, and then next week I'll answer as many as I possibly can. In about a week, I'm going to be doing a meetup here in Joshua Tree, California. So if you guys want to stay tuned and find out where we're going to meet up, what time, what day, go over and check out the community tab on my main page of my YouTube channel, and that's where I'll be posting all the information for the meetup here in Josh. If you haven't had a chance yet, go over and check me out on Instagram. I've been posting a lot of new photos lately of some of the things that Snuggles and I have going on throughout the week, plus some pictures from some past hikes. If you found any value in this video, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and as always, guys, thanks for watching.